Welcome to the Paradigm Shift Microshow, your micro dose of low-code news, hot takes, and dev-flavored entertainment. No fluff, just the good stuff, all in the time it takes to build a microflow. Let's jump in. I have the usual suspects with me again today, coming to you from the city of sin, where the only thing riskier than the blackjack tables is deploying it to production on a Friday. It's Neil Hones.
Hi, everyone.
And fresh off the farm and straight into your pull requests, he writes code like he bales hay. Fast, rough, and somehow it holds together. Don't let the dirt under his nails fool you. He'll out debug you before you can say non-persistent entity. It is Jordan Choquette.
Hello, everybody.
And of course, my co-host with the ultimate sexy 70s dad vibes. He's got strong opinions and stronger coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Perkins.
Hey, y'all.
So today the topic is little things. What annoys you or what makes you happy? We'll start with Scott, but the goal is, what small things do you enjoy part of your day-to-day with developing in low code? And what annoys the crap out of you? So Scott, let's get going.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the things that annoy me first, because those are always top of mind, right? Especially like at the end of the workday. Like, okay, here's an example. Okay, I've just created an enumeration, right? And there's lots of opinions on what the casing should be for enumerations, right? Should it be all caps? Should it be camel case? Should it be Pascal case? One of my pet peeves, the thing that drives me insane, is if there's a standard in the enumeration already, if everything's already capitalized, someone goes in there and they're like, this should be lowercase. That drives me insane. It's a little thing. Does it actually impact anything in the application? Does it create bugs? Like, you could argue maybe no, but when I have to remember, oh, this is the one-off in the enumeration that's lowercase and the rest of them are all caps, that drives me insane.
Big OCD trigger for sure.
Yeah. So lots of stuff like that. You know, I think naming in general is one of my pet peeves. I like when things are named well and consistently. Yeah.
Everybody has their own style, and it seems like maybe it just comes down to consistency.
Yeah, well, I think that's what annoys me, is that everyone does have their own style, right? I mean, like if you go read the Mendix best practices documentation, it spells out very clearly entities should be named Pascal case, which means like, or title case. Other people call it title case. So capital first word, capital second word, with singular pluralization, right? So if it's like, if you're creating an entity to represent vehicles, the entity should be called vehicle, singular. The other thing is, like, for associations, it spells out in the best practices that you should have entity 1 underscore entity 2, right? That's how you should name your associations. If you have like multiple, or you need to be more specific, then you need to add an additional underscore and the purpose of that association. So I think that is one of those things that, like, yeah, naming doesn't really impact necessarily the application and the way that it runs, but like there is very well spelled out best practices for the way things that should be like the way things that should be named, and Mendix even is publishing those best practices for naming. But it seems like everyone kind of adds their own flair to it, which you know, I mean, if you have good reason, great. But I think importantly, your team should have documented best standards, best practices and naming standards, and during code review, you should nitpick on those things. I know it seems like a small thing. I hate nitpicking during code reviews on naming things, but as a developer, if you want to like make your team lead happy, just read the documentation on best practices for naming things and do them, and like make them a religious pursuit where it's like every name is perfectly conformant to the naming standard.
You know, I should have led the episode with this, but developers get really religious about small things. And because I think that's just our natural progression. You know, you start to learn something, you start to master something, and then it's what makes good code versus bad code. Like, it's often just the little things. tabs versus spaces. Probably, and often they don't like, oh, if you're just trying to like, if you're just trying to get extreme with something, performance is a good example. You're like, well, if you like format it this, it might be like, a millisecond better. Like that's what our industry is. And that's what we're judged on, is like these small performance enhancements or these small optimizations. So we get riled up about these little things. And so that's why I think this episode is going to be interesting.
One thing I was gonna bring up that I think you had brought up just over Slack one day too, that Scott also, I think this drives you crazy, is when somebody creates a sub microflow and the first three, letters are capital SUB, and
Should be
you're
that
like, just
SOB.
yeah,
Yes.
just like cut to the chase. Which I thought was really interesting because I feel like Mendix, from a best practice standpoint, or how they kind of like lay it out in some of their training stuff, like they still use that like sub prefix for like subflows.
Yes, thank you for stealing mine, Jordan. Yes, that
Oh,
is
damn it!
that
I'm
that
sorry,
was
John. Well, you're going next, John.
All right, okay, I may as well. What's the deal with subs, right? Yeah, that is my annoyance, is subs, especially when you jump. What's the point? What is the value of the prefix sub? Does anyone want to make a counterpoint? I'll start there. Is there any
Yeah,
value in seeing subs? Go ahead, Neil.
I think, to play the other side, I think the initial thinking behind the subs was to organize logic, right? So if you have a big process that you're running and you want to organize, the the flow of the logic into your, let's say, into your app explorer or into your folder structure, right? You have maybe you create a folder for hey, I've got to upload this to, a third party system, right? So you've got your top level microflow, and then within that folder you see what's the top level, and then you see what is, a sub process of that. So maybe a sub process would be, authentication with their API or things like that. And so initially the thought is, well, I want to be able to know what top level microflow this sub process serves. But, ultimately that sub process shouldn't really be thought of as only a sub process, right? I mean, back to our way of approaching it is, it's not just an authentication, excuse me, for, you know, this one process of uploading to, this third party system. It's just a general authentication process. So I think initially it was just to help organize certain pieces of functionality, and just keep them in one block, maybe in the Explorer, to think, okay, well, let me just break this up so someone who's jumping in can see, well, this sub is directly related to this, and through the App Explorer, if I type in the name of this process, I'm going to see the top level and all the maybe other things that go into it.
Okay, that is a good point. And to be clear, I do think that there is a space for subs, but it speaks to a coupling of a microflow, right? That it's coupled with something. If you're using, I think what I would consider an accurate usage of sub, in that it's actually tightly coupled with one microflow. But the way that we develop and the way that I develop is that I'm making components that could possibly be reused and should be reused. And I'm always having that forefront in mind. And therefore, even though I'm only using it in one place, I don't use sub.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you might be able to use it somewhere else in the future or reuse it. And then also, if your definition of sub is that it's a microflow that's just not a parent, like it's just everything would be a sub. Everything's a sub. There's no point in saying sub, because all your microflows will be subs. When you have a parent, which is defined by a number of prefixes, ACT or on-change or whatever, like, based on that prefix, that is something that's called as the parent from the UI or just the parent microflow. Everything else is going to be a sub of that.
I really like organizing naming around the object that you're dealing with, right? And I think that comes from like my background in object-oriented programming is it's like you have vehicle dot create, vehicle dot drive, vehicle dot stop, right? And so like when you're naming microflows, like especially components of that object, that's the way that I think it makes the most sense to name them. So it'd be like in your, in your example, you wouldn't be sub person underscore validate. It would just be person underscore validate, right? And you can know, oh, this takes a person and it runs the validation on this person, returns a Boolean. You just kind of know what the microflow does based on the name.
To
Sub doesn't
Neil's
add to
point,
that.
though, there's times like examples like scripts, like
Mhm.
where subs make sense, where like having that visual pairing between a sub and a parent I think can make sense. But I'm just of the opinion that 80 to probably no 90-95% of the time sub isn't used, and I think most people just use them wrong anyway.
You know, the one
Uh,
that thing that drives me nuts, kind of related to that, when you're in a microflow and you see one of the sub calls is ACT or
yeah,
OCH, and you're just like,
yeah,
what are you doing?
yeah.
Everything is ACT. That's the other thing that drives me nuts when everything is ACT. You'll see a lot of noobs do this. Everything is ACT. Don't do that.
Probably guilty of that.
Yeah, Jordan, front end guy, naming your microflows wrong.
Yeah. Um, Neil, I don't think we've gotten to you yet.
Yeah, mine's kind of related to what you mentioned with subs and coupling is passing in whole objects when you really are not trying to, you really don't need the object itself, right? So that I think happens a lot of time with sub microflows in that you create this coupling because you're saying, well, pass in this object because I'm going to transform this string into something else. And in reality, you're making this sub tightly coupled because you're telling this sub it has to receive this type of specific entity. Where in reality, you can just create the parameter for a string and pass in that object string, or maybe it's a couple of fields, right? But if you're not actually, committing something to that object, you just need to transform a string or an integer or do some calculations or that sort of thing. You can remove the tight coupling of subs to the main process by not passing in the entire object. And I think that also helps with efficiency. You're not passing in, let's say, you've got a transaction object that's got 40 plus fields on it, but you're only interacting with, let's say, two or three, or you need to make changes to two or three, and you're not actually doing the commit in the subflow, right? Because that would be not a best practice. But if you're only interacting with a few attributes or things like that, and you don't need to pass in the whole object, then be specific. And then that way, that microflow doesn't become a sub anymore. It becomes a, you know, string transformation or, calculation or that sort of thing. So it's kind of related to the subflow, but it's, passing in or making things specific to an object when it doesn't need to be.
I think that's a really good point because I think I think that definitely helps with reusability. Um, on that note, I think one thing that I hate to see is when you have 30 parameters coming into a microflow and they're all strings, right? So like I think there is a balance there where yeah, if you are dealing with one or two or three, maybe up to four fields from a object, it's probably better to just pass in the primitive values instead because it makes it more usable. But if you do have, a good collection of things that need to get included in that microflows parameters, like wrapping them up as an object and passing that in makes it a little bit cleaner because it's like you're just less likely to make a mistake of whoops, I put like string A in the slot for string B and now I'm like doing the transformation wrong because I mismatched the parameters.
Or yeah, if that sub is being used in a ton of places, and then you decide, hey, I need to add a parameter for this specific use case,
Mhm.
and now you've got 20 errors in your modeler of, hey, you need to update the parameters for every other place you've used this subflow. It now needs to account for this additional parameter, and yeah, that just becomes a big pain.
I'm gonna go off there and comment on one of the things that makes me really happy, which is a newer feature, is the optional parameters, because that solves that issue, right? You can just mark that parameter now as optional, and all of a sudden you don't have to go.
Nillable. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's definitely a nice feature. It kind of can be a foot gun because if you're expecting that thing not to be null and now you said it's optional, of course there's an option that it could be null. But yeah, I think that's yeah, I think it's like all around like just thinking about how you can organize your things to be reusable is yeah, definitely one of those leveling up kind of skills.
Jordan, what do you got? I know you stole mine, but did you have any of your
I did. It's more related actually to the modeler of one thing that I come across a lot as I'm like going back and forth to like a lot of different like pages or microflows or what have you of like in the drop down of like kind of your tabs, you can see everything that you have open, but you can't reorder things in that drop down. You have to go tab by tab and click and drag like 3 freaking pages at a time all the way if you want to get it close to something that you're working on in the complete front of all the things that you have open. It drives me up a wall. I'm like, why can't I just reorganize things in this drop down? It would be so easy. And then I wouldn't get confused as I'm trying to like go back and forth of like if I have multiple pages or flows of cards that I'm working on at one time and I'm trying to organize those in a way of like things like other like things are together, then I just spend endless amounts of time clicking and dragging back and forth and it it makes me crazy.
Now, I don't know if you've ran into this, Jordan, but when I grab those tabs and I'm trying to reorganize by just dragging the tabs across, a lot of the times it'll grab the entire window. You know how with the modeler, it's all modular, right? So you can drag
Yes.
certain areas to whichever side of the screen you like. It grabs the main window, right? Sometimes when I'm moving the tab, and
Oh
in the
my
back
God,
of
all the
my mind, I'm
time.
thinking,
And
Yeah.
then it
can
tries to
you
like
put this
split
main
it into
window
cross
anywhere
sections and I'm
else?
like, I don't want that.
Yeah, but at the same time, why is this main window draggable? Like
Yeah.
no one's putting, their microflow editor or their page editor into, one of the buckets in the corners or the sides, right? So I don't know why that's moved
Psychopaths are.
in
I
there.
don't know.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I saw one of my colleagues, they moved their properties and styling sidebar to the left side and I was so lost. I was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Dude, you know what I'm talking about? The
Left
properties
side?
and style? Left side.
Yeah.
Weirdo.
Gross. So yeah,
Have you ever seen
that's my pet peeve.
Oh, thanks, Jordan. Have you ever seen kind of related in way of funky development setups? You ever seen people develop microflows vertically?
Mm.
Yes.
I don't think I've seen it that like as somebody like doing that habitually. But
I'm working on one right now with Neil actually. It's organized vertically and I'm just like when I first opened it, I was like, what in the hell is going on
Well,
here?
it's multiple horizontal paths,
Yeah,
right?
it's true. It's
We've
true.
got
It's
we've got a split
horizontal
on a
and
static, but
vertical.
are
yeah.
you
And when it,
yeah, I was gonna say, do you have like multiple splits? Because I could see like if you're doing what I would call like an if else kind of tree where it's like if it's this thing and then it goes down, if else it's this thing. I could see the vertical paths, but
I've seen a couple developers who did, and maybe I think they came from, I don't know, I think Gauss Systems goes vertical. Can't remember, but their microflows were just straight down. Like I was like reading a tapestry or something like that.
Yep. I've
There's
seen
another
that.
thing that annoys me is when true doesn't go to the right. Do you guys?
oh, that drives me insane. Absolutely drives me insane.
And I don't know. So this is a rule that I learned and just carried over of just always going true to the right. And it might be part of best practice, but I can't really recall why. But it still bugs me when it doesn't.
It's harder to read. I think like if you look at like I mean, I guess for those of us that speak in languages that are written left to right, you're just so used to going left to right, you know. And so I think when people start flipping the true and false paths where it
Mhm.
goes down, it just like I find that I often misread the code because of the reversed true or false paths.
The only trouble is when you start writing double negatives, where it's like, okay, is not just to get true to go to the right.
I still think that's better. Maybe your expression is kind of weird and double negative like,
Yeah.
but you can still make a
Yeah.
caption that makes sense in your split that says,
Right.
"Is this thing true?" Great, go to the right.
You can
All
also
right, let's get into. I'm
confuse
sorry.
new
You want to say something,
developers.
Jordan?
I was just gonna say you can also confuse new developers by having double negatives, so it's like good for that.
True.
One
True.
one small thing, John, before we go to the positives.
Yeah.
Not having your modules in alphabetical order. I had to throw this in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is just maybe a personal pet peeve, but if I'm digging through and I think, this is the last module where I'm looking for something, I know the module name, and it's just a complete mess, and I've got to go back and forth, or I've kind of got to memorize where it is in the App Explorer, drives me nuts.
What
Yeah,
about
those big
attributes
projects. Yeah.
in order? Do you guys alphabetize your attributes on the entity?
I can't say that I do regularly, no.
I
I would-
start. Yeah.
I don't, but I definitely group them in like put them logically together, like
Yeah.
dates, associations. What about like writing to like editing an entity? You're setting attributes. Like I always make sure my associations are like at the bottom, the attributes on top, associations on the bottom. That's just the way I order.
Yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
good point, John. When it's like a new attribute and it's being joined in with some pre-existing ones, I'll move it up so it's like, hey, I've clumped these dates together, or these fields that work together, in the same.
Yeah, I like that. I don't alphabetize either, but I could see like that being one of those things that people get annoyed with, because it is like, especially when you have like a huge entity that's got 50 gazillion attributes on it, it's always needle in the haystack if they're not organized in some manner. What about colors? Do you guys like colored actions?
Oh,
I hate them.
do.
Oh man, that is disgusting, John.
You don't do colors?
No. Well, okay, I don't mind the colors if there's like a standard across the board where all apps at all the organizations use the same colors. Like if there's like some standard to the color, great. But if it's just like, I'm feeling blue today, all the activities are going to be blue, and then tomorrow is purple and the next day is yellow, like that drives me insane. You're not adding anything. I think if I had to pick, I would just like standard old blue. Like the caption's there to tell you what that thing is doing. The color is just distracting.
The reason why I like colors is for like just your scanning ability of looking at a microflow that has a lot of things to it, actions and subcalls. I only color subcalls. I only
What color?
color when a microflow. I go orange. So I'm in dark mode, and that looks the best for me. And that's the only person I care about is my experience. But I color those just because it's easy to see where the subs are being called in a microflow.
Yeah.
I don't go wild with it. To your point, you need consistency, and I always push consistency with myself, and I try to do it in the projects that I'm in, and hope that people follow suit, and they have. So yeah, colors are nice for me. Do you guys use colors, Neil and Jordan?
Loser. It's just you, John.
Oh, all right. Well,
I mean, if we could set it up as like Scott said, like a project setting, like, hey, if you're making, an outside API call, then it's going to be yellow or something like that. And then, creating new objects is this color, committing objects is this color, subs is this one. And it was just out of the box, as long as I don't have to click 3 extra things every time and know what color it is and all that. But yeah.
The organization I'm working at now actually has that set up like in all of their apps, in their app template, where they have like specified colors for subcalls, for delete actions. And it's not, I mean, it's like kind of grown on me. I wouldn't say grown on me. I still prefer blue for everything, but it's not as obnoxious as everything is different colors ad hoc. based on the feeling of the day.
Let's get into things that make us happy. So little things that make us happy. I'll start. There's a couple of things, some new releases that made me happy that I've noticed with developing recently. One is the so when you put in a loop, like almost always it's never the right size. It's almost always it's too small when you want to iterate. And so what you have to do usually is, especially if you're plugging it into a microflow that already exists in the middle of it, like, oh, fuck, okay, then select everything, move it to the right, extend, so you have some space. But now when you put it in, I don't know if this was 1022, I'm working in 1022, or 1021 or before that. If you extend it, it'll move everything in your microflow over, so you don't have to do that. That's my little thing that makes me happy now.
That's pretty
This
awesome.
Yeah. I think this is a pretty older, it's kind of on that same note. I think this is an older feature, but the distribute horizontally and vertically options like on your selection. Do you remember when you used to have to just like spend a fair bit of time at the end of your microflow just to like realign everything, space it out? Yeah, I'm so glad that that's baked in. Now it's just a click option.
And I'll just rapid fire through my other thing. I have two others that make me happy. The other one is the merging into your microflow. So that thing now, at least in 1022, when you add it to your microflow, it's like it's itsy bitsy. It's not a giant merge like the same thing a split is, and it's itsy bitsy because I like it itsy bitsy. I don't know if do you guys change the sizes of your merges when you put them in your microflow just to make it smaller? Okay,
That's actually
right.
like one
Maybe
of my
I'm the
pet
only
peeves
one.
that I don't like. I don't like when things are changed size.
Dude, but you're trying to optimize your microflow space, right?
Optimize for what though, right? I think it's easier to
for
read.
readability.
I think it freaks me out when it's not consistent, right? Because like, you know, if it's like the same size that it is when you drag it in, or if it's the same, the other thing that drives me nuts is when the shapes are changed, right? It's not a diamond anymore. Now it's like maybe a flat
yeah, it's
pancake
like some,
diamond.
yeah.
Yeah, I hate that. I just like the
Yeah.
vanilla Mendix. Just like give it to me how it comes out of the box. That's how I like it. 70
I don't
dad
know if Mendix
vibes.
did this because their developers like it itsy bitsy, or because maybe they like they're like they did some insights and just evaluated bunch of microflows and saw that people were putting in itsy bitsies. I'm just gonna also Mendix, can you just rename it the itsy bitsy join? I think that's a good name. But what I always do with my microflows, I don't know if you guys do this, is I always try to just like get rid of unnecessary space. Like after I'm making it or as I'm making it, I'm like, okay, there's too much space. I'm gonna make this as compact. I try to, if possible, like make it readable. Like you can see it end to end in one screen. You don't have to scroll. So I try to like bunch things up together as much as I can. But now I just do that, whether it would fit or not, just to try and just get rid of unnecessary space. And that's why I like having a itsy bitsy. Is they're just too big. They just take up space. They don't need to.
I wonder if it was like a colorblind issue. You're just getting the merges and the exclusive splits mixed up.
That's a good point.
Oh yeah, so they differentiated the size.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Curious if you guys do this. So if you guys are calling a sub microflow, do you extend the shape of it so that the name of the sub is readable
yeah.
all the way across?
No.
God,
Or
I
do you
hate
just
it.
let
I
the
hate
tech
you
wrap?
people that don't.
This is why John and I don't work on projects together, because we would just fight like cats and dogs.
How do you not? It's just when you can't. All right. On one hand, I just got finished arguing that I like everything compact, and now I'm going to argue that I like to extend my microflow calls so you can see the whole name, which will extend the whole thing longer. But you don't. It's not readable then. Like when you're calling your sub, and you just like cut down.
Maybe I could tolerate the extending like the shapes for the sub microflow calls, but I absolutely hate when people change the caption names on like the default activities, right? So if it's a commit action and they call it like save something, I'm just like, that is confusing to me, because now I don't know if it's a sub microflow call or if it's a commit action or what it is. Like I like, especially for the out of the box activities, excluding the sub microflow call, I like the default captions. I guess that's back to one of the things that drives me nuts. But maybe default captions make me happy. Default captions on activities.
Me too. Do you mess with them, Neil and Jordan? Do you mess with your activity, either the names, captions, or the size of them?
Don't. I
Yeah,
leave it
not
as is.
really.
I mean, I think I used to on like impactful or what I would consider like heavy lifting sub microflows. I used to extend it so you could see the whole name. And mentally, it was just easier because I would, scan through the microflow and see that sub and it be, horizontally bigger than the others and know, okay, that's one where I'm doing, a lot of the heavy lifting, or this is the big chunk of code in this microflow. But I've kind of leaned away from it recently.
I think
Jordan,
it's
what makes you happy?
This is kind of vague, but I really do feel like I'm still in this um like beginner's mind phase where like anytime I'm like working on a card and I actually like see it come to fruition in the app, it like blows my mind. I don't know, I'm just like such a simpleton in that way. I'm just like, I can't believe that actually worked. So just that in general, like keeps me going, makes me happy, amidst like all the other like I think rather like mind-numbing frustrations of like I don't understand this, that, or the other, and I have to talk to this, that, or the other person to like understand what's going on, and somehow again it like yeah, it all comes together and it like works. That's like a pretty fulfilling, happy feeling.
Jordan, is you remind me of like a you're you're a drug user that's still getting his first highs. It has yet to lose its luster. It is enjoyable to see things, but it's adorable to hear that
Yeah,
that's
talk
what
to
you're.
me in a few years and I'll probably say something.
Neil, what's yours?
It's kind of an old feature, but it's styling being its own dedicated section, no longer like stuck in the properties. It's very clear, where you have to look. So it's either there or it's in a custom class in your CSS file, right? You don't need to check, you know, this properties tab or this, styling CSS section. Everything's kind of where you want it, and there's a lot more out of the box features. So I don't need to go in and make, super minor adjustments to make the button a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. The padding and the margins are now really easy. As someone who's not a styling guy like Jordan, more out of the box features, more options for styling. I'm always happy to embrace.
Have you guys used design properties much, or extended your design properties at all? This was something that I saw, like, I think it was last week. There was a developer on one of the teams that I'm working on, and he was extending the design properties for like the default inputs, and it just like blew my mind how nice that feature is to be able to extend those.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I've never done that before.
When you say extend, like changing the classes that they output and the
No,
design, like when you
so
put
so
padding, like, okay.
Yeah, so you picture the styling tab, right? And you've got like think of a container, right? You've got like
Yeah.
the pull left, pull right kind of options,
Uh-huh.
align self. He had added some properties for Flexbox, so you could choose
Oh,
like, oh, I
yeah.
want this to display flex, and then you could choose, do I want this to render as a column or a row? Do I want to have gap spacing rather than having to do margin and padding on everything? And then like by extending those design properties, it would just show up in the styling tab on all of the widgets that you extend on. Um, I thought that was a like that's a like one of those things that made me really happy, but it was also one of those things that I was like kind of unaware of. That's a newer feature of Mendix.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, I haven't extended, but I know that there's just a ton of stuff that you can just do that could be integrated within the platform. I think that's one area that Mendix could use some work. Anyone have anything else that makes them happy other than working at Paradigm?
This one's not related to the modeler, but it's when projects actually revisit stuff where you've kind of like you cut off maybe some functionality to make it MVP, or you cut something off to fit it in a sprint, or say, all right, well, that's gonna, we can make the next iteration. I think a lot of the times a sprint gets, feature based, or, there's a theme, or there's a certain group that you're serving within a sprint. And that next iteration tends to fall to the wayside until, you're building functionality again for that group of users, or for that, side of the business. And it's tough going back through the modeler and seeing that, half finished, three quarters finished functionality, knowing that like it could really be significantly better. We just kind of need to kind of get back in there. Um, a lot of the times, if it's not revisited, it kind of speaks to, is that last piece of functionality really that needed? But there's a difference between it working and it being really good, a really good UX, right? Or a really good experience for the user. So, yeah, I enjoy, getting the chance to get back into things, and, after working with it, seeing the improvements later on and having the chance to make those improvements. Because a lot of the times you'll see old stuff lingering around, and you're like, oh yeah, we were gonna make it better doing that, and you just never get the chance to. But when stuff gets tracked and it doesn't get pushed to the wayside and is kind of kept close, and you get a chance to make those improvements, I like doing that.
I feel like that's one of those instances too, Neil, where it's like, yeah, everything like functions well enough, but then when you do roll out that like extra layer, and you're like using that same piece of, UX, or, you know, you're going through that user experience again, and you're like, how did I do this before I had this like other functionality built on top of it? It's always nice to like get that.
Yeah, I feel like in general we don't get a lot of opportunities to polish features. I feel like most of the time, like a lot of the apps are like, get it out there, get it working. That's like the most important piece. But it isn't. Yeah, I definitely see that. Um, it feels really good to polish things, like when the base functionality is there, and you just like get to kind of like put the cherry on top and make it really, really nice. I know John gets really excited about some of his headers and things like that he's been showing me lately.
Yeah, I've been known to screenshot things like that and to share it with other devs like Scott, because you're so excited about like getting to do things the way that complete the vision. It's completing the vision that makes things excited. And Neil, you kind of talk about like it just sounds like also just like a well-run project too, that enables you to do that, where you come back, you clean up your debt, you finish a project. But it's also really satisfying, and I thought this is where you're going to go with it. It's also really, I think, really satisfying to just cut stuff out of MVP. Like as you're nearing you got a month left, and like, and of course, as the devs, we're just we're kind of just along for the ride. Of course, we have some say in different projects, but yet it's not our decision on what the business wants in the MVP. But when you get that product person that just comes in like, you know what? Yeah, we'll just cut that. No, that's out. That's out. That's out. And you're just like, oh my God, this is great. That makes me happy too.
Do you know what's kind of on that same vein that I like get an unreasonable amount of enjoyment from? Deleting code or deleting things out of the modeler. When you like go through and you like find usages, oh, this big stupid microflow isn't even used. Delete. Like that feels so good. The project gets smaller, easier to understand. Oh yeah.
Banish the old code.
Yeah.
And then you do something like you talked about in our last micro show, where you start just renaming things like,
whoops,
it should be this. Yeah.
Deleted that thing that was called from a Java action. It actually was being used, and now production's down. Yeah, that is definitely the downside. So, I don't go too crazy with the deletions. It is nice. Like I don't know if you guys remember back in the day where like the only way you could call a microflow from a Java action was like with the string value of the name of the microflow, and those were really risky because you'd go click find usages and the modeler would never show that it was used, but it was called from some Java action by name somewhere. Now that you can pass some microflow name, or like you can actually pass a microflow parameter to the Java actions, that it'll show up in the usages now, which is much better. But yeah, so less risky going to town deleting stuff.
For sure. Well, I think that's where we'll cap it. We're just about at time. So that's it for us today, everybody. One thing I want to note for the listeners, we have a Discord server now. So what little things annoy you or make you happy? Let us know. Join our Discord server. I'll put it in the description of this episode. We'd love to hear what you think. We'll be hanging out there, so come chat. And that's it. So till next time, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. See you guys.
See ya.